Punters, we're back. Third straight day of footy rants, and we will kick things off with part 2 of the round 9 preview for this week's NRL competition. And we saw the round start last night, as you would have known from yesterday's episode with the Bronx and Penrith. I don't want to review too much. I think I'll leave that format until next week. Obviously, the Bronx going on to win that 32-18 after a little bit of a scare towards the back end of the game. But other than that, we'll leave it there and drive straight on forward into the preview for tonight's Friday night clashes. Our first one being the Rabbitohs versus Manly. For me, look, this is going to be another tight game for both teams. Where I think the big difference obviously lies is the return of Adam Reynolds for the Rabbitohs. And remembering back to earlier in the season, round 2, these teams came up against each other, and that was Reynolds' first game back after his appendicitis issue, and they fucking dominated 38-18. So we've seen obviously Manly come into their own since round 2, and had a good win in Canberra last week in Golden Point. But where I think South will have a bit of an edge is obviously playing off the back of Sam Burgess. So if Sam Burgess plays to the standard that he has been and getting the meters going forward, and if some of the other front rowers can get off the back of that, having Sutton move back to his edge and the form that Crichton's in at the moment, I think there's some real danger signs to be had there on the edges. But again, as we all know, you've got to earn the right to play to those edges first. You can't simply just go straight there. You've got to sort of find your way into the game. And I mean, you know, the starting front rowers for Manly and Lawrence and Tapau, and obviously you've got Travojevic, the captain there too, are no slouches. So, you know, it's going to be a battle up front early. I'm really keen to see Burgess and Tapau go at it. And yeah, if the Rabbitohs can gain some ascendancy early. We all saw some of the lines that Crichton was running last week. He scored a great try to get the Rabbitohs well and truly back in the game. And if he can repeat that, that could be a difference for them. Where I think Manly will have some success, again, it could be on that fringe. You look at some of the outside backs for the Rabbitohs in Hunt, Talakai and Robert Jennings, relatively inexperienced when it comes to NRL games under their belt. And then you've got some powerhouses there in Tafua, Walker and Uate. So, you know, it could go either way. Will the experience of the Manly outside backs weigh into it, or will the form and experience of those back rowers for the Rabbitohs, that's where I see it going. And another big turning point in the game, I think, could be Robbie Farah coming off the bench. As much as it pains me as a Queenslander to say it, I think that he could be the difference from them when you're looking at Farah versus Hastings. I think Farah obviously brings a hell of a lot more to a side, especially if it's late in the game and it is close. Farah's ability, the short kicking game close to the line and getting repeat sets could just be what tips them over the edge. So for me, I'm looking at a Rabbits 1-12, basically because of the Farah factor and Reynolds returning. And just a little quick stat, Rabbitohs have won 5 of the last 7 against Manly, so I think they'll continue on their winning ways and make it 6 from 8. Oh, and one last thing. Anthony Cherrington, one of my mates, has been named in the reserves. Fucking give the cunt a go. Surely he's better than Jason Clark. Madge, something, doing. Let's go. Anthony Cherrington, vote number 1. Let's go. Anyway, sorry, distracted. Moving forward to my team, Cowboys. Cowboys versus Para at home. Still a lot of question marks at present moment. We still don't know whether Thurston's playing. For everything that I have been reading, that decision was going to be made at a session this morning. They're going to give him right up to the last minute, basically. So by the time this has been posted, I dare say we will know if that is the case. And to be perfectly honest, I think the result essentially hinges on that decision. I think if Thurston's there, it just settles the ship. We know the experience, and more importantly, just getting back to a similar skill set that Reynolds brings back to the Rabbitohs is that short kicking game, the ability to get repeat sets, trapping the opposition in the in goal. It's something that's invaluable, and it can be a game changer. You know, the difference between a 7 tackle set and you getting the ball back is massive. So, yeah, obviously a lot hinges around that. You're looking at the return of Sean Fensom as well, which would be a massive plus. And also wanted to give another big rap from last week to Ray Thompson and his return back to the NRL. Yeah, it was a little bit sluggish, I'll give him that, as far as his service out of 9. But, you know, he hasn't played in a long, long time, and, you know, he's not getting any younger. But just another cool head. So I think if you times Thompson by the factor of Thurston, and then you multiply that again by the fact that you've got Kenny Edwards playing at 6 with the injury to Takarangi from last week. Yeah, you just don't know. All of a sudden, it could be a Cows 13 plus affair. So, yeah, it's hard to sort of judge. I'll be leaving my tip right up to that last minute tonight, and it will essentially hinge around the fact of whether or not Thurston's back. But in saying that, if he's not back, I don't write them off. I think it'll still be close even without. I think without Thurston, they're starting to get a little bit of confidence now. You know, they put together a much better second half performance against the Knights, and that was with changing the halves combination again. You know, they dropped Ben Hampton out and brought Thompson in. So, yeah, there's a few little changes there, but again, throwing the pressure straight back onto Kalen Ponga. He needs to deliver. You know, you look at someone like a Clint Gutherson who's playing fullback for Parramatta at the moment, and he will bring the ball back. If you're not getting meters out of your own end working in unison, you're going to make it a really, really tough, long night for the forwards who are already trying to make up for the lack of creativity that you sort of got in your halves at the moment with Thurston being absent. So, yeah, a few things hinging there. I think Michael Morgan also needs to step up. I know we touched on a few things with his form. Obviously found himself in an Australian jersey off the bench for next weekend's Anzac Test. Again, I think it was pretty lucky, and it probably sort of pays back to that loyalty card that Meninga seems to be playing there, at least for this one-off Test match anyway. But yeah, it's time for him to start getting back to the potential that we know he's capable of delivering at. Just to keep himself on good terms with Kevy Walters for the Origin campaign, which is only, you know, just over a month away from now game 1. He's no shoe-in for that too. There's a few, you know, I was having a conversation with a few different people, opportunities for a couple of players in the game at the moment that are playing well to slide into that utility role. I've tossed up the name of Andrew McCulloch. I think he's playing some fucking really, really good footy this year. You know, he's not going to let you down in the middle as far as his defence is concerned. Yes, he's not as big a body as Morgan, but, you know, also grew up playing in the halves through the NYC system. So, you know, I think he's definitely on Walter's radar for sure. So, yeah, you don't want to rest on your laurels and think that you're just going to be a walk-up start for game 1. So, yeah, ultimately, losing Takarangi is a big creative spark that they lose. Kenny Edwards is a whole lot of fun to watch. He definitely loves the game. He loves being out there. You can tell he enjoys every minute with the boys, and, you know, he's always fucking char-hooing after a forward makes a good shot and forces an error, or any time a boy scores, he's one of the first blokes in there jumping on and starting that pylon. So, you know, I think a lot of it's going to come down to enthusiasm. And one thing I think the Cowboys have been lacking a little bit without Thurston is they just don't seem to be enjoying their footy as much. Even when they start to get the ascendancy, it almost just seems like they're just so stressed. It becomes more of a relief that, oh, fuck, thank God we got away with that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, for me, I would just like to see the Cowboys start enjoying themselves a little bit more and getting into the groove. Because, yeah, they seem to have lost that edge a little bit. You know, I think even just from last week, bringing back Antonio Winterstein, who's obviously a low, heavy-set winger who you sort of know what you're going to get in replacement for Gideon Gillum-Osby, who, is an absolute live wire. I think you sort of just lose that flair a little bit, and sometimes it can make things just a little bit boring. I'd look to the Cowboys just to be a bit more creative, and regardless of whether or not Thurston's there, just to start fucking enjoying themselves a little bit more, because you could see how much, even though Parramatta stressed themselves out a little bit towards the back end of the game against Penrith, they were very much enjoying themselves. Corey Norman has that infectious vibe about him where he's always smiling and laughing, and again, Kenny Edwards echoes that. So yeah, more fun. Fucking, if you're not having fun, it's just work like anything else, really, isn't it? So yeah, for me, I think the result hinges 1 to 12 either way, depending on whether or not Thurston plays. So yeah, unfortunately, I wish I did have the information, but I don't at present for filming. Moving on to Saturday night's games, and big opportunities to be had for the Titans. So obviously generating a lot of momentum last week now after knocking off the defending premiers Cronulla in Cronulla, which is, amplifies that result. 4 teams that are currently in front of the Titans in the Tigers, Warriors, Rabbits, and Penrith, who we now know have lost that game last night. Warriors have the Roosters, the Tigers have the Sharkies, and the Rabbits, who we've just spoken about, have Manly. All sort of 50-50 games, definitely could see all 3 of those teams losing those games. And if the Titans get up, which, they're expected to win, that could get them up as high as 11th. So now they're only on the back end after, it's still been a slow start for them, but now they're on the back end of that 8 already. So they can really start getting into the grind of their season. So a massive opportunity for Gold Coast. But at the same time, with a loss for Penrith again last night, it's tonight's opportunity to get points on the board. Their only win this year, coincidentally, against this very club in the Gold Coast, 34-26 in round 2. So that will fill them with a little bit of confidence just psychologically. As far as lineups are concerned, a bit of a hit again to the injury-ravaged Gold Coast Titans. You see Grevesmore, Copley and Lawton all out, but we see the inclusion of Tyrone Roberts-Davis back on the wing, and LG will be on the bench. So that spine from last week for the Gold Coast will get the go-ahead again. And you would have to think that LG may partake in the game somewhere in the middle, or perhaps with a very real possibility that he'll come on at 6 and Tyrone Roberts will move to 9 when Pete's goes for a spell. So it will be really interesting to see how they use LG. I can't see him replacing a forward and them just jeopardising and risking having that many small bodies on there, despite, the Knights not having an overbearing forward pack as far as size and speed goes. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Neil Henry does in regards to LG. Again, I think the back 3 will deliver a lot. In Hayne, Anthony Don's in great form at the moment. I think a lot hinges there. But ultimately, again, I keep saying it week after week, Safidi and Starling, starting front rows for Newcastle. You're coming up against Jared Wallace and Ryan James. They're both banging on the door of rep honours. Their numbers as far as tackles and running meters each week have been, first class. So you keep giving your side that sort of go forward momentum, and then you've got your edges in McQueen and Proctor, and then, you're finishing your plays off with someone like a Hurrell or a Hayne. You've got a recipe for disaster for Newcastle. So it really could be anything. We've seen another change in the halves for Newcastle now with Jalen Feeney coming off the bench from last week, and he'll start at 7 with Mataudia going back to the back row. Unfortunately, Mitch Barnett has succumbed to injury, which sees Luke Yates jump into the starting side, and Joe Wardle will come into the bench. So again, Tupou, Wardle, Stockwell and Jacob Safidi off the bench, not giving you a whole lot. I mean, I know Anthony Tupou's been around forever and a day, and he's not going to do anything wrong at this time of his career, but at the same time, he doesn't have that attacking potency that he once did in his early playing days for the Roosters. So yeah, for me, again, it'll be the Titans now coming off the back of that upset win, and now there's an expectation that they go on and do that. So, you look at averages, and, the Gold Coast haven't gone back-to-back wins this year. Newcastle are at 6 losses in a row. Do the numbers game, Newcastle do have to win again eventually. So, that psychological advantage that they'll carry into that game, we have fucking beaten this team before. So, yeah, it will be very, very interesting. I think a lot will hinge around how that forward pack for Newcastle stands up against the go-forward of Wallace and James early on. If they can stand up to that task, it'll then just be shutting down the creativity of Jarryd Hayne. But for me, I think the prospect of having LG, Roberts, Taylor and Hayne, they can all kick, they can all pass, they can all run. That's a scary sight for me when the Titans are getting into good ball. So yeah, for me, I think it's a Gold Coast win, and they should go back to back for the first time this year, and they'll really, really be wanting to get that momentum building, because they've got the Storm in the doubleheader at Suncorp next week. So if they can come off the back of 2 wins, knowing that one of those is against a genuine premiership threat in Cronulla, and the fact that Melbourne will have had 2 tough games in a row. The Warriors took them to the edge, and they've got St. George this week. You just don't know. And if Hayne gets in this mood, anything can happen. So yeah, for me, it's Titans, and I'd probably take him at 13 plus, to be honest. Into our next game, we've got Dogs and Canberra. Now, Canberra go into this one as favourites, despite losing to Manly last week. But for me, even though the Bulldogs did go down to the Tigers in a disappointing loss last week, I don't know. I've just got a smoky feeling about the Dogs for some reason. I think, that there hasn't really been any changes for either team. Clay Priest comes back onto the bench for the Raiders, and Will Hopewadi and Matt Frawley have been named in the reserves, but Frawley's been named in the reserves the last couple of weeks, so I'd expect him to play again. And to be fair, with the form of the Morris brothers, especially Brett at fullback, he's been doing a great job for them. If I'm looking at from a club standard and moral aspect, with all due respect to the guts that it takes for someone like Hopewadi to put his faith over the game, there's no way that you can be a player in that team and feel hard done by as someone who's potentially losing a spot because he just comes back just because you're not playing on a Sunday. So, I think that would be hard not to create a riff at some point with some players. So for me, if I'm Hasler and I'm looking at, yes, we lost to the Tigers last week, but the back 5, they didn't play too bad. They were pretty damn good. Montoya scored a good try. Like I said, the Morris brothers in that chase last week to run down. It was his name evades me. David Norfoluma. They chased down. So that was a great pairing. Branko Lee again, Mr. Hot and Cold, is quite destructive coming back on the inside of the play, especially if a team isn't tying back in, and we know, the edge defense at times with Croker and Kotrick, they can sort of overplay their hand as far as the slide defense goes, so there will be opportunities there. But again, Branko Lee does have that error. I think he come up with 2 or 3 last week at crucial times, and that's going to make you pay. Just a couple of notable mentions. I think if Josh Jackson keeps playing with the authority that it has been in the last couple of weeks, I thought he was pretty unlucky not to get a sniff off the bench for the Australian team. And you times that by all this question that comes around Papali's drink driving charge now. If he does end up getting stood down, that's a massive loss as far as go forward. They'll be most definitely looking to isolate the halves with Papali and be getting at Reynolds and making sure that he's getting through a shit ton of work. So yeah, look, as far as the Papali incident goes, yes, you need to address behaviour of the players, but when it comes from an incident, and again, it seems pretty bizarre, apparently he called the police on himself. I don't know the exact ins and outs of why or what the point of it was, or whatever it was, but yeah, for whatever reason he's been charged. This was in January. The club did already know about it as far as I'm aware, and we're dealing with it. He was stood down from the leadership group as a consequence. But to see him lose game time now, I think it would just make the game look stupid. Potentially he loses out on a rep jersey now based on principle, but should that be just a delayed effect? I think, it misses the point. He doesn't learn anything from that. The learning should have already happened from the initial outset. You can't learn a lesson 4 months after fucking something's happened, with that severity. He's already lost his license, blah, 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 blah. Fucking fine him, do whatever you got to do. But yeah, I don't think that he should miss a game for Canberra. I'd be quite okay if he doesn't play in the test match next weekend. But yeah, as far as suspending him now, I think it's pointless, and it would just look more embarrassing on the NRL's behalf if that were the case. Yeah, so for me, again, I know I haven't really given too much indication as to why I think the Bulldogs will win or deserve to win or should win. A lot just comes down to the effort that Brett Morris has been giving at the back. I think if he is given the opportunity and Will Hopewadi doesn't play, that he'll continue in his run of good form. If Matt Frawley can just iron out a few of his kicking decisions, we all know that he does bring a lot, but then it adds that pressure to make sure that you keep following that up. So if he brings that kicking game, that they're a massive chance, and we've seen, a few weeks ago when they did play the Rabbitohs, they just capitalised on the opportunities. We know that they're not an overly creative and flashy side. They haven't. What are we looking at here as far as attack goes? Points scored, match average 15 versus 25. So on average, the Raiders score 10 more points. So we know they're not going to run the Raiders off the park, but they just have to make sure that they're taking their opportunities when they come on board. So, that goes through getting through your kick chase, repeat set, and a lot of that will hinge on Frawley. So for me, I think it will be another close one, and I'll take the Dogs on an upset, 1-12. Moving forward, Tigers Sharks, another game of opportunity, one that poses a few threats for punters. Yeah, Tigers coming off the back of that upset win, as we were just discussing, against Canterbury, and the Sharks coming off the back of an upset loss against the Titans. So far this year, the Tigers haven't had back-to-back wins, and Cronulla haven't had back-to-back losses. So one of those will break this week. A few of the lineup changes. Bakuya is out, but Luke Lewis comes back into the side. Beale's an addition back onto the wing, which forces Capewell back to the bench, and then that bench spot is removed through Tagatisi, who's just named in the reserve, so he'll go back to reserve grade this week. Another promising positive for the Tigers is the fact that the Tigers have no changes. So I'm fairly certain, with the exception of Brooks from the week before, it's been the same team for the last couple of weeks since Cleary's been at the helm, which I think, again, is a big contrast aside from Penrith. They just keep making very, very slight changes here, there, around that back row centre position. And that's causing enough disruption where they can't find that consistency, even around 6 now as well, with Cartwright and Martin in and out. So, yeah, there's a few little things there that will benefit the Tigers as far as the no changes, but they're big pluses in Lewis. And Beale, you know what you're going to get on the wing there. I thought Capel had been doing a really good job, but I think more importantly, they'll probably miss Jason Bakuya. He's been playing the house down the last 2 or 3 weeks and has been giving him a lot in the middle and on the edge. He floats intermittently quite well. But, the Sharkies, they've only won 2 of their last 7 attempts at Leichhardt Oval, so that will fill the Tigers with a little bit of confidence. A few things starting to tip their way. But the glaring point for me in where the game's either going to be won or lost is the stat that I brought up before on the Tigers. Tries conceded within the 20 to 50 metre line. So once you break that 50 metre line working into the 20, so you're not even inside their 20 yet. So from that 50 to 20, the Tigers have conceded 14 of their 37 tries in defence, whereas the Sharks have only conceded 2 of their total 16. So the Tigers have let in more than double the tries, and then 7 times that amount within that. So that tells me that all you got to do is just get into their half, and you're a massive chance. So if that can now be countered and kept under control with more of the balance that comes with Mitchell Moses and Luke Brooks being a part of that halves outfit, and even, Tedesco's ability to kick at the line as he sweeps out the back and looks to whether he goes for short pass, long pass, or kick. He does have those 3 options available to him. It's gonna hinge on the point of if the Tigers can build that pressure and then capitalise on that, but then also making sure that the back 3, so that's going to be Tedesco, Norfoluma, and Kevin Aguama, they've got to be really, really good in their positioning and those kicks from Townsend and Maloney. The less repeat sets that you can give the Sharks, the more opportunities you're going to get. And we've seen that ultimately was what Anthony Don was able to do for the Gold Coast last week. So that one win to get out of his in-goal, to prevent that dropout, was what hinged on that victory for the Titans. So for me, it sort of lies there again. If the Sharks get some good ball and build some pressure, the Tigers probably aren't going to stand up to it. So if the Sharks do build the pressure, they go on to win. If the Tigers build the pressure, they go on to win. So that's where it is won and lost for me. I don't think it's necessarily a battle too much with any particular sort of positions. You've got Valentine Holmes coming into some form now over the last fortnight. Tedesco's continued on his way. If anything, probably Jack Bird's got some ascendancy, and Ricky Latelli in the centres over Cheekham and Sully. The halves, they all sort of bring their own little bit of individual flair at times. James Maloney, a bit of mongrel. If they just get on top of that discipline, I think I was reading now, Maloney's up to like 19 penalties for the season, 4 in last week's game alone, which just isn't up to the standard. Forwards up front, Woods, Siamanafanai against Fafita and Pryor. So, Woods versus Fafita, and then you've got the lesser in Siamanafanai and Pryor. But I think Pryor's been playing the house down as well for a smaller front rower. He gets through some work. And then, Wade Graham and Chris Lawrence, they both bring ample amounts of opportunity and talent, and same with Elijah Taylor and Paul Gallen. So for me, across the board, paper-wise, there's not too much room. If anything, it's probably just on those fringes. If Lewis and Graham can create some opportunities for Bird and Latelli, getting that go forward, building that pressure, you're probably going to have some joy on those edges. But for me, I like the Sharks. I think they'll bounce back. I do think that they are genuine premiership threats again, even though they did go down to the Titans last week. So yeah, I look at Sharks still in a close one. I think it'll be a 1-12 affair again. So the Sharkies are paying $3.10 on that one for the punters who are having a look for a bit of value. That's what I found for you there. Moving on to the Warriors Roosters. So Again, the Warriors being a part of that little cohort of teams that the Titans are trying to chase down, so they'll be keen to make sure that they don't make this their third straight loss. You know, they've come up against some fair opposition in the last fortnight in the Raiders and the Storm, going down 20-12 to the Raiders and then 20-14. 20-8 against the Raiders and 20-14 against the Storm. They'll have considered themselves fairly unlucky last week. I thought they did a really good job at creating some space on those edges, at stripping Chase Blair and Addo Carr at times, and left, you know, Munster and Stimson saying, "Oh fuck, what the fuck are we doing?" So for me, I think it's just it's a case of a week by week. You know, I don't think they'll be too disheartened. You know, obviously it's 4 competition points down the drain, but the experience and the momentum that they are slowly building, you know, every minute that Foran and Johnson play together is absolute gold for a team like the Warriors. You know, the more consistency that they can get out of their squad week in, week out, much like the Tigers have done the last couple of weeks now, much like the Dragons have done from the outset of the season, it proves that if you keep putting that same 17 out, you look at the 2015 Cowboys side, it was the same 17 week after week after week after week after week. I think they might have even broken a record, that team, for the most back-to-back same starting sides. So, yeah, I think they're a massive chance, and I'm tipping another upset here in the Warriors. I think it'll be super, super close. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to Golden Point again, so I wouldn't be surprised if Roosters have to go more than 80 minutes to try and get their 2 points. A little bit of value there, $19 for the game to go to Golden Point, yes, no. And the Warriors, $3.30, 1-12. So, you know, a little bit of value to play there with for the punters. The Warriors beat the Roosters on both occasions last year. And one of those was in Golden Point. So, you know, there's a little bit of history there of tight games. And again, they'll just look to build off that that momentum from the last 2 weeks in getting quite close to genuine premiership contenders. But also they won't want the Titans to run them down if they do go on to beat Newcastle this round as well. Roosters obviously coming off a big Anzac Day win. You know, that game, I think it was the 17th edition of that Anzac match against the Dragons, and for Pearce to shake that stat of 0 from 18 would have been one that filled him with confidence, especially moving into this Origin period now. And, you know, Luke Keary won't want to be shying away from the Origin spotlight either, you know. Even though I don't think he will get picked for game 1, I think they will go with Pearce Maloney. That doesn't mean he can drop his bundle. You know, rugby league's a funny thing. There's still four rounds to get through. You know, injuries could happen. You know, game 1 could be diabolical for them, and Maloney gets dropped. So he needs to stay in form, because, in my opinion, he's next in line for that 6th jersey. Someone that I'd like to see stand up for the Roosters, if they're going to try and find a little bit more momentum up the middle before they look to the flare on the outside, is Aiden Guerra. You know, he's probably slipped out of the form that we've seen him in a couple of years ago when he burst onto the Origin scene. And it was good last week defensively. You know, he was very, very sound, making 47 tackles, but I'd just like to see him get on the ball a little bit more. You know, he only had 8 runs for 70 metres. So, you know, if he can double that output and get on the level of someone like a Napa, who ran for in excess of 120 metres off the bench, and he's earned his start this weekend with Isaac Liu dropping back to the bench, you know, it's just going to add that go forward. And, you know, you've got Boyd Cordner, who's playing so well. Mitch Orbison's back this week as well, which leaves Kane Evans out of the starting 17. So, you know, when you're dropping players with the veracity of a Kane Evans, you need to take that as a bit of a warning shot to say, hey, like, no one's safe in this 17 at this club. Like, I've got to stand up and keep playing to the standard that I know I'm capable of, because, you know, if he lets anything sort of slide there, he could be a real chance of missing out on an Origin spot. And I know everything's not all about playing representative football, but you never want to miss out on an opportunity from something that you could control. Injuries and suspension and all that sort of shit are a different kettle of fish. But when you can control the controllables, it's up to you to take a lead. And as a senior player of what is quite a relatively young team, they need to stand up, because this Warriors forward pack is super experienced. You've got the likes of Madalino, Mannering, Hoffman, Lillyman. So, and then you've got halves like Foran and Johnson. They're not going to let you off the hook so easy. So it's up to the forwards to stand up, and then let the outside backs, do their job. You've got Ferguson there. Even the footwork of Joe Manu. He's worked really well back on the inside in the absence of the Latrell Mitchell, who's I believe 18th man. It will be interesting, but where I think they will definitely target is a young debutant for the Warriors. I hope I don't do his name any injustice, is Shans Nickel Klokstad. I've done a little bit of background on him. He's actually a Melbourne Storm junior, came through the SG Ball system there a few years ago. Was picked up as a 15-year-old from Altona Roosters in Melbourne. So moved from New Zealand to Melbourne, and Altona's actually the same club that Gareth Widdop played for. So, a little bit of a breeding ground for that Melbourne Rugby League club, which is a big rap to them, producing 2 NRL players now, and I could be wrong, there may be more. But to my knowledge, that's the only 2. So, so Nickel Klokstad, a Maori and Norwegian heritage. He's actually also played 2 games for the Cook Islands over the last couple of years. So debuted for them in 2015 on the wing, and has also played fullback. Last year signed with the Warriors on a 2-year deal, so didn't get a start last year. Gets his opportunity this weekend. He's only a 21-year-old and was the in-trust Super Premiership Player of the Year for the Warriors last year, and also made the Team of the Year. So obviously comes with a lot of talent and I guess expectation now around his debut. He's finally getting his shot, but when you've got the experience of an also young team in the Roosters, I think they'll look to put him under a lot of pressure under the high ball. So if it does happen to be greasy conditions on a Sunday arvo in Auckland, look out, kid, you could be in for a long day. But as we've seen in the past so often, debutants have an uncanny ability to get on the board and score some tries. So could go either way there. But for me, nothing against the Roosters. I like the way that they're playing, and you definitely can never write them off, and they may well go on their winning ways, but they'll definitely want to go back-to-back wins. But I think for me, it's the Warriors to break a 2-game losing streak at home in Golden Points. So 1-12, get around that $19 Golden Point option. And our final game before we wrap up the podcast for today, the Dragons versus Storm. Now the big question, no Widdop, no win. Can the Dragons salvage something and get over the top of a really dominant Melbourne Storm outfit from the last few years? Getting straight to the betting markets, and there is value there with the Dragons 1-12, $4. So the punters have already written them off in their eyes. They can't really see it happening. But once Widdop went off, everyone was saying that was them done. And they did definitely lose their way, and you could see that the momentum shifted. Roosters started scoring their tries, but then all of a sudden, come Dugan back on the field post that HIA, and he grabs the game by the balls, gets them on the go forward, and then kicks that goal to take it to Golden Point. A lot of it hinges on whether or not Dugan can stand up. Another one for me, the forward pack is going to be a great clash, and to be fair, I think that the Dragons will stand up. I think the forward pack definitely matches that, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that all plays out. We see Kenny Bromwich come back into the side after welcoming the birth of his first child, so congrats, big man. And then we see Riley Jacks maintain his spot on the bench. So interesting there to see Bellamy go with the option that a number of coaches have been implementing thus far in 2017, and that's keeping that utility back on the bench. So we've seen that in Brisbane and the Bulldogs. Also a bit of a interesting look to see that a lot of those clubs play similar, that they're sort of grindy winners, and so it's an interesting pattern to notice, and I'd be really keen to see their rationale from each different coach as to why. I can see probably a bit more from the Storm and Bulldogs perspective as to why they carry that half. But I would love to get into Wayne Bennett's head with his rationale in carrying a winger on the bench. David Mead only got 5 minutes last night. So where the Storm can win it and where they can lose it, again, I've kept pressing the point that I don't think Munster has created that flow for that Melbourne Storm spine just yet. Is that going to happen this week? If it does, who knows? The Storm may come out and absolutely fucking obliterate this Dragons lineup. I personally can't see that happening, but areas of the game, and I've identified 3 Dragons players that I think they need to lock down if they are going to go on to win this game, and they are Dugan, Nana McDonald, and Jack DeBellin. So I'll unpack that a little bit. Obviously, Dugan, you're going to have to watch his ball-playing ability and his ability to skip out on the outside and then get that one-handed flick away. But more importantly, as a pairing in Dugan and McDonald, I would actually use the tactic of trying to feed them as much football as I can. As I'm a team working out of my own end, I'm trying to kick to my corners and identify them. But obviously not corners. If I'm I wouldn't worry about Jason Nightingale. I'd be trying to identify McDonald and Dugan, getting them touching the footy as much as they can, having to expend as much energy as they can out of their back end in order to zap them of some energy when they do get their opportunities in good ball. So the more energy they have to expend there, I wouldn't be looking to kick the ball out of play and limit their ability out of there. I would just trust my structures and make sure that I'm putting a good kick chase pressure on those guys. And for DeBellin, again, it's just stopping that second phase play. He's got a really, really good offload after contact. So if they can secure that, just having a look at some offloads there. Both teams are great offloading teams. So they're averaging 13 and 11 respectively, with the Dragons just coming out on top with a couple more offloads. So if they can secure that and get that well below their average, they're every chance of going on to win. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I'm still sort of sitting on the fence. I think I'm going to have to stew a little bit more on it as the game gets closer. But it could go either way. The fact that they did stand up once Widdop did go off injured, but can they play a full 80 without him is going to be the real question. And can Munster finally fire at 6 now that he's starting to get a bit of game time under his belt there? And I would assume that Riley Jacks has done an outstanding job, but I'd have to think they'll send him back to the Sunny Coast Falcons in the not too distant future. And that may even still happen. We just don't know yet. Just because he has been named in the 17 doesn't mean that is the be-all and end-all. It will be interesting to see whether they just change that up and keep Joe Stimson on the bench. So if I have to make a call now, I'd have to go Storm in a close one, just with the Widdop factor. I think for me is just too much. Running, kicking, he's been phenomenal. Just over 80 minutes. If you were to parallel it again in the exact same scenario as the Roosters game last week, and he gets injured sort of during the game, maybe they are a bit of a chance. But outside of that, I think potentially the Storm in a close one. Alrighty, crew. Well, enjoy your weekend of football. I hope you have enjoyed back to back. I know I have definitely enjoyed the process of going day after day after day and talking everything rugby league and swimming in all this new knowledge that I don't normally get to delve into as I normally would, being a former strength conditioning coach with the Storm. So yeah, it's been good just to do something different and become a bit more of a student of the game again. So I hope you guys are enjoying some of the content I've been pushing out. If you have been enjoying it, share the page, please. Subscribe to the YouTube, tag any mates, stay on top of the statuses that I post. I try and get a little bit of content out there during the games and get your feedback and post about anything controversial. And yeah, the more I think we can get talking about this game, the better, because if you guys are anything like me and love this game, I want to give you guys a voice and let you share your opinion and views on it, because I know we all have one. Righty, legends, enjoy your Friday and up the motherfucking Cowboys.